Okay. There's one other point I'd like to come back to you on, this idea of you were suggesting that you don't kind of look at the whole life cycle directly. Yeah. Do you think that's a fundamental weakness of the construction supply side of the construction industry at this period of time?
I think it's, well, first I'll caveat, we do look at the whole life of buildings, but we don't look forward to managing them. Yeah. I think it's a weakness in terms of the way in which property, probably assets across the board, are managed in the UK, probably around the world, in which that decisions are made by different people, yes, with regard to different time frames. Yeah. And if I was to take this university, for example, as a case study for how that might occur, one thinks you've got a group of clients, the faculty, who will say, this is what we need. And if that's a science faculty, a laboratory, they'll need everything to be absolutely exactly what they require. It's got to be the best. Then on the other side, you've got an estates group who, one thing, they have to deliver that project within a capital budget, and they've probably got to manage it over a period of time. And they'll be managing two different budgets. And then you've got the finance group as well, who are actually probably looking at the long-term assets. So you've got three groups of people, probably with completely different sets of agendas and different sets of stakeholders as well. And that is a microcosm of the industry that we deal with. And if one thinks of the faculty as being possibly an end user twice removed, they're possibly a tenant or even a subtenant of an office building. And then actually the owner, the finance group, is actually going to be an investor in a property who doesn't even know that that property exists. You can see that it's very difficult to wield these things together. And I think effective project teams who start to think about the long-term implications but build in flexibility are probably as far as it can go. The clients who can manage large estates are few and far between, and probably quite a few of them have got a long way to go before they emphasise their estate as being the major part of their management problems.
Do you think this has been something that's changed over recent years, is where you've had to, or expended greater effort in trying to understand and get close to the end users of facilities to a greater extent than perhaps you did in the past?
That's going to be a classic.
Or are you still very, to a large extent, dependent on the internal management and approach of the client organisation itself to try and clarify what its overall expectations are, and to try and draw those different threads together into a coherent brief for the design and implementation team?
I'll give a yes or no answer on that with a classic consultant answer. I think firstly is that the way clients think about buildings now, I suspect, is rather more proactive and positive than it might have been 15, 20 years ago. But it's fair to say that my perspective 15, 20 years ago would have been of a relatively new entrant to the industry rather than where I see it now. The challenges for operators of buildings now are much more explicit. So if one thinks about, say, a supermarket estates director now, they have to think about things like energy performance certificates. They have to think about terms of probably aspects of waste management that they didn't have to worry about at that time. So there's a lot more metrics that people are thinking about. And as organisations rationalise their management, I suspect that more of these requirements will come focused on the single individuals. In terms of most buildings, I'd suggest that loose fit is still actually what clients need, because they don't know what's going to be required in 5 years' time, let alone 20 years' time, which is the life of the shell. So again, going back to that sense of trying to anticipate what that building might have to do over its 20 or 30-year lifespan, and providing a solution that takes that into account, rather than trying to shoehorn people into a single solution, is probably where the state of the art is at the moment. And if one was to think about building schools for the future, huge programme, 45 billion. The project teams there are faced with the conundrum of firstly operating with a huge number of different end users. So you've got a consortium that's trying to deal with possibly 10, 20, 30 heads. Each of them has got a different idea of what education is, and each of them is being asked to respond to a challenge which says transform education. Oh, and by the way, could you deliver it in a sustainable way, and could you do this, oh, and could you involve the community as well? So I think a response that helps people come back with a solution that addresses all those issues, but doesn't shoehorn people into a single solution that they'll then find in 5 years' time doesn't support IT or sustainability or whatever, would be a big mistake.